The Other Side of Fear, a Backpacker's Memoir by Jenni Reavis. Unhidden Heroine Series, Book Number 1, Chapter 28, Argentina. What would be on the other side of those mountains? Before I left to find out, I wanted to see something new in Chile. Gosh, I had been there a total of 8 months and only saw bits and pieces of Santiago. Once I left Santiago, my plan was to go south 8 hours to spend time in a town called Pucón, which I had heard was beautiful with mountains and a litany of outdoor activities such as rappelling and whitewater rafting. I figured I would have great experiences there before deciding where to cross the border into Argentina. It felt so good to be on the bus, leaving there after months of doing the same things over and over like a hamster on a wheel. I was melancholic because of the wonderful things I had experienced, but joyful about closing the chapter so I could open a new one. However, the universe threw me a curveball upon arriving in Pucón. I traveled overnight from Santiago and arrived mid-morning to discover it was freezing cold, so foggy that I couldn't even see buildings around me, and rain was coming down in torrents. All I had on was my cotton Harvard hoodie with a long-sleeve t-shirt and other t-shirts underneath. It all got wet, and nothing I had was waterproof. While walking to find my hostel, everything else I had got soaked, including what was in my suitcase. I was frozen to the bone before I even got to my hostel. When I got there, the owner told me all the tourism offices were shut down for a few days since the winter storm was blowing through. So basically, if I stayed, I would just be hanging out at my hostel around the wood stove with the 3 other people who were guests there. I would not be able to go do anything in town. Fuck that, I thought. I decided I would just find a way to get to Argentina. I wanted to get away from the cold. Before committing to pay for that night, I found a bus terminal selling tickets to Argentina. It was a bus ticket kiosk inside of a little convenience store. The ride would be on a small bus running just across the border into the first little town on the Argentinian side, a little place called Junín de los Andes. It wouldn't leave until early the next morning. That bus ride to Junín de los Andes was only 3 hours, and it was one of the most beautiful border crossing experiences I had ever had. Our bus was full, maybe 20 people, and the driver chained our tires as we entered the snowy, icy Andean mountains. My God, as if the mountain scenery wouldn't have been beautiful enough, I was blessed by the honor of seeing the view during winter, with all the foliage disguised in ice and snow. It was like riding through a winter wonderland. Halfway through the mountain pass, the bus stopped on the side of the road. We were instructed to get out and follow the driver with our documents. We crunched through the snow together for a few yards to a little wood cabin with a border patrol inside to issue passport stamps. I was entering Argentina. I was entering country number 5. There I was, embedded in this winter wonderland, staring up at the blue sky. I opened my arms wide and let out a rooster crow that rang through the voluptuous surroundings while I waved my passport at the sky. "I'm in Argentina!" I laughed. The people from my bus probably thought I was crazy. No, they were crazy. I was normal. I was living my life. I was born to live all these experiences. When I got to Junín, the bus terminal was tiny because the population was only 10,000 people, making it a bit smaller than Jardín. This was my first impression of Argentina. I took off on foot to find a bed for the night. I really wanted a shower, get a good meal, and rest for one night instead of plowing forward on a night bus. I didn't even know where to go next. I finally found a local person who told me where to find a bed for the night. After I got there and paid for my bed for one night, the owner informed me that there would be no running water for a couple of days while they fixed a plumbing issue. I felt like I had a seafood buffet in my pants, half a roll of toilet paper stuck in my ass, and an onion farm growing underneath all the layers of shirts I had on, but a shower would have to wait again. I walked back into town to find a diner that served local food. What would be my first experience with Argentinian cuisine? I got a bottle of Malbec, which was divine, and tried 3 different desserts I had never seen. They were exquisite, and the prices were so cheap. When I left, the snow was coming down so hard I could barely see around me, but I had so much fun sucking down the rest of that wine right from the bottle, soaking my shoes once again in the snow that was piling up, and catching snowflakes on my tongue. These were not your normal snowflakes. These were Argentinian snowflakes. I pretended that each one was arriving just to welcome me along my new path, and I stumbled through the streets until I found my hostel again. My only option to get back north was to take an 8-hour bus to Neuquén. On the bus, I sat next to another angel who'd been placed in my life for a moment. Katrina shared stories with me about her life, from experience being a teenage mother with no support from her family or the father of her daughter, and how that had pushed her into a life of entrepreneurship. She gave me the lowdown on Argentinian slang, shared her snacks, wrote down famous dishes for me to try while I was there, and then she fished out an extra SIM card she had in her purse, and even helped me get it into my phone so that I could use my phone in the new country. Before we parted ways at the bus terminal, we gave each other a tight hug goodbye, promising we wouldn't ever let the hard stuff detour us, but instead allow it to be a step to go higher in life and become who we were born to be. I was delighted to discover that at my hostel it was rare for tourists to stay. It was full of local Argentinians and Venezuelans who paid a monthly rate to stay there while they worked for the booming oil and gas industry. I was relieved to finally take a hot shower and get warm. I had been chilled to the bone with wet shoes and feet since I left Santiago. I made friends with the guys in my hostel, and they were kind enough to host a no-shit Argentinian grill out on my last night. It was my first night to try Fernet, the liquor that locals drink, and soon we all went somewhere to play pool until the sun came up. I literally ran back to my hostel to grab my bags and showed up drunk as a skunk to catch my bus. As soon as I boarded the bus, the driver was able to pull out so we could begin our journey. I watched the sun come up as we pulled out onto the highway, and before my eyes slammed shut, I laughed about how much my cheeks hurt from laughing all night long. My next stop was 15 hours north, a place called Mendoza, which is a famous destination for wine drinkers on the west side of Argentina. I arrived at Hostal de los Artistas, and as soon as I walked into the front door, I ran into an American guy named Mark, who I had met before at the Red House Hostel back in Santiago. I set my things on my bunk when a girl walked into our room and said, "Sarah and I rented a car to go spend a day in the Andes. We're going to stop for pictures along the way, and our end goal is to make it up to the lookout point for Aconcagua. Do y'all want to come?" She looked back and forth between me and the girl across from me in her bunk, who I had not yet met. "You should watch your expenses until you can do online teaching." My thought process started, but it got interrupted by my mouth saying that I would love to go. I wanted to say yes to everything because I knew I only had one chance to live this experience. I had no winter clothes, but Mark was kind enough to loan his layered windbreaker. We were Jessie from Canada, Sarah from New Zealand, Simone from Germany, who shared my room, and crazy beautiful me. The places we stopped for pictures were breathtakingly beautiful, beyond anything I could have imagined. It was a totally different beauty than the mountains I had drank up in Colombia. Once up into the mountains, we hiked through the snow until we got to the lookout point to see Aconcagua, its elevation of nearly 7,000 meters, making it the tallest mountain in the Americas. The wind was just ripping through those snowy mountains. I couldn't imagine not having the windbreaker from Mark. We were on a long paved road back to where we had parked when I said jokingly, "Imagine how invigorating this Arctic wind would be if we were naked." The girl from New Zealand said, "I want to find out. Who wants to join me?" We all just looked at her like she was crazy. Without skipping a beat, she started stripping down completely naked except for her tennis shoes. She cupped her mouth to let out a loud, happy cry, and she took off sprinting, buck-ass naked, right into the roaring winter wind as fast as she could. Our tears, laughs, and whistles pushing her forward until she threw herself onto the snow to make a naked snow angel. We laughed so hard all the way back to the hostel, and as soon as we got there, Mark and his New Zealand friend Kane got the grill ready for a huge cookout. The owner joined with a box of assorted Argentinian wines, and we drank and ate like it was the Last Supper. The next morning, Simona and Jessie suggested that we go on a wine tasting tour. I didn't feel up to making decisions and was happy to go along for the bus ride. The three of us went bus hopping until we found our stop on the outskirts of town where there were dozens of vineyards. We knew we had struck gold when at our very first stop, we discovered that $7 each covered a 3-course meal made from scratch by the chef, along with our very own wine flight. Each of us ordered different foods and wines so we could try it all. We sat there long after we were through with our food, our bare pedicured feet on the ledge of the table, passing wines back and forth, taking in the view of vast vineyards with the snowy Andes behind them, and sharing our travel experiences. The sky was a clear blue that day with warm sunshine, which made us peel off our sweatshirts. It was absolutely perfect. We did this on repeat at 2 more wineries until we were so sloshed we couldn't keep track of our stories or which language we were speaking, and then we hitchhiked back into town. We ended up staying there for a whole week, cooking out every night with my group of friends and exploring together in groups to see new things during the day. I knew I would eventually make it to Buenos Aires, the capital located on the east side of Argentina, but I decided to spend a month in a place called Córdoba, the halfway point to the capital from where I was in Mendoza. I asked the owner of my hostel, Danny, if he had any connections for a place where I could rent a room in the Córdoba area. It turned out he had several family members that owned a big property in a town called Carlos Paz, about an hour away from the big city of Córdoba. He made one phone call and said his family would have a place ready for me with everything I needed and would be happy to pick me up from the bus terminal when I got there. After an overnight 12-hour bus ride, his sister-in-law and cousin were there waiting to welcome me with open arms and take me to where I would stay for the next month. You can imagine my surprise when, after entering their gated property, they led me to a cabin behind their house that they usually rent out to travelers during high peak season, but which was vacant now in winter. For $200 a month, I had the whole cabin to myself. It was fully furnished. I had a big bed with blankets and pillows, a kitchen, and a big table in a bathroom all for me. I had Wi-Fi, so it was a perfect place to be able to teach online for a month while I explored the area. I spent a whole month in this cozy, wonderful place. It was so quiet I could hear the neighbors' cows moo close by every morning while I drank my coffee on the front porch. A 10-minute walk from the big iron gate took me to a little store where I got all the groceries and toiletries I needed. Right behind that store was an entrance to a passageway that led to San Roque Lake, where I walked on my days off. I sat by the blue water while I read books or journaled. I made friends with Paula, a family member who lived on the property. She was a hard-working single mother who loved to invite me over for homemade empanadas and fernet. When I first got to Colombia, I had met an Argentinian lady while hiking in Salento the first time I saw the Colombian mountains. We stayed in touch as I continued traveling, and it turns out she lived only an hour away from where I was, so she came to see me one day. She told me she had many memories of spending summer vacations in the little town where I was. One day, I got a text from Simona, the German girl who I had explored with in Mendoza. She came to stay with me for a week. She was a nature person, very quiet, and it was a perfect setup for her to share the other half of the cabin. We had so much fun, making delicious vegetarian dishes, and at night we drank wine while she taught me German. We went paddling in a canoe one day and got lost on the lake. We paddled for hours looking for the dock where we had rented the boat. It was really cloudy that day, and the way the mountain's foliage peeked through the fog reminded me of a scene from Jurassic Park. Her last full day there, I woke up really sad. I told her I was going to stay in my room all day, teaching English online, but she insisted I go with her on a long hike to Cerro de la Cruz, a small mountain whose peak offered a lookout over the whole city and surrounding geography. She had already made us snacks, and everything was ready for our fun day hiking. We introduced ourselves to the others on the summit once we finished the hike and had a great conversation with one of the guys named Leo. We ended up making the descent on that path together, where I found out he currently lived in Buenos Aires, but had left to travel for a few days. He gave me his number and told me to contact him whenever I got to Buenos Aires if I felt like it. The Wi-Fi at the cabin faded in and out, so I was only able to make enough to cover my expenses for rent and a bus ticket to get to my next spot. I knew I had to find a place with better Wi-Fi, where I could make more income fairly soon. I had been in contact with 2 families that planned on receiving me when I got to Buenos Aires. But when I showed up in the big city, I couldn't get a hold of either of them. I was truly alone in this new big city, different than any other city I had seen yet. The first night at my hostel, I looked for a cheap room on Airbnb where I could go for a month to work as many hours as I could. I had no idea that the room I chose was in a really, really bad neighborhood. The Wi-Fi also cut in and out there, but I'd already paid for a full month of rent, so I had to push through. I struggled with a lot of darkness and despair inside of me, not even realizing to what extent. It rained a lot, and it was so cold. There was no heater in my room, and the window opened up to the main street, where there was always noise. I left my room once a week to get groceries from the supermarket 3 blocks away, and I bought economic things like pasta that would last me for a few days. All I did was teach online, drink wine, and eat pasta in my room. The only time I came out was to use the bathroom or shower. But there were 2 other people renting rooms on that floor, and we all shared the bathroom at the end of the hall. One of the people was a very kind young woman from Brazil who ventured out to join me while I cooked pasta. We had broken conversations, with her practicing her basic English and me practicing the Portuguese I had picked up in my travels. I discovered that since Portuguese is in the same language family as Spanish, she could talk to me slowly in her language, and I could understand most of what she said. I always drank wine out of a coffee mug while I taught. I kept the bottle within arm's reach so that I could refill my cup without anyone seeing. One night, I got so sloshed that I was really starting to mess up my classes. After I finished that class, I started singing karaoke by myself in my room and decided I wanted to go find some beer. It was a terrible drunk decision to wander out so late at night to find a kiosk, and it was a decision that got me robbed. A couple of nights later, I heard loud noises and watched a knife fight between 2 guys on the street right outside my window. I lay there night after night, shivering and drunk under blankets, crying myself to sleep. One morning, it dawned on me that I never texted Leo. I was not, indeed, alone in this new big city. I was scared to open myself to someone new. My nerves were shaken from the bad experiences I had had thus far in this new place. Still, I decided to give it a chance. The first day we hung out, I met him at the bus stop down the street from my room, and his first words were, "What in the hell are you doing in this neighborhood?" All we could do was laugh about it. As a matter of fact, we started laughing that day and never stopped. I don't think I've ever had so much fun hanging out with someone. He was kind, pure-hearted, and respectful, and was a traveler pursuing the same path I'd already been traveling for some time since I'd left the States. He helped me find a new room in a better neighborhood. The day that he came over to help me pack and move my things, he gasped when he walked into my room and saw so many empty wine bottles lined up against the wall next to the desk where I taught. "Is this your stash from the past month that you've stayed here?" I was ashamed to tell him that all those wine bottles were just from the past few days of drinking alone in my room. My routine there had been to fill my mug with wine instead of coffee during 4 hours of early teaching, eat some pasta and take a long nap, then open a new bottle for my night classes. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked. He genuinely cared, and something about his sincerity reached me very deeply. At that point, I realized maybe I had not been so okay. His sincerity helped me shine light where I needed it the most. When I needed it the most. Leo and I spent our time having so much fun while he took me all around town, showing me every part of the big city. He took me to the port where we played pool, drank beers, and ate some street food on the coast by the river. We went to Tigray for a day and had a blast, drinking local liquor on a boat, hooting and hollering across the water like we owned all of it. He took me to a place to sing karaoke where I felt brave enough after several drinks to sing Adele in front of a bar full of people. I learned that it didn't matter how many mistakes I made singing. When I sing in English in a place that doesn't speak it, the people think I'm the best singer they've ever heard. One weekend, we caught a last-minute bus to the beach town Mar del Plata so that I could say I visited the ocean on the east side of the continent, and a couple of times I took a ferry over to the coast of Uruguay just to say I'd been to that country. My new semester was in full swing, so my weekly schedule was a blur of intense coursework and trying to get as much work online as possible. On the weekends, Leo and I would find something to do. Something fun to do. After a couple months of this, Leo said, "I am bored with the routine. I want to go see my cousin in northern Argentina. I want you to come with me." I decided that everything I did for school and work was online, and I could do it there, so I said yes. We were hungry for travel and had to answer when it called us. Leo found an announcement from a truck driver who was heading 17 hours north to Salta and had a spot for 2 people to ride along. The next day, we were stuffed inside the back cab of the truck and began our overnight haul. Time at his cousin Sally's house was a delight, where we spent so much time around the dinner table eating home-cooked food. We explored the area until Leo saw a post on one of his travel pages from a French couple looking to share car rental expenses on a 4-day adventure to see a common tourist loop through surrounding small towns. Off we went to practice our French with strangers. This was the first time I had traveled so much with another person, and although we had moments that were wonderful, we had just as many that were not. While we had many things in common, we both acknowledged that neither of us was able to open up to the other in a deeper way for a potential relationship because we both needed to heal first. There was something about Leo that made me look at myself in a deeper way. There was something about him that made me think about everything in a deeper way. He told me he wanted to go to Brazil for at least 3 months by himself so that he could heal, and he hoped I could meet up with him again whenever I decided to backpack up the eastern coast of the continent. I agreed that I would go forward alone, too, at least for a while, and the feeling was mutual about a desire to journey together again in a different chapter. Before he left, we went out on the town with his cousins and their friends. It was Halloween night in Argentina, and they wanted a night out. What could it hurt? It's just one more party.